So one of the things that I worked on back in 2001, and I always like to preface my talks these days with this slide. SANS and the FBI, they were working on a top 10 common security mistakes made by people. And this was back in 2001. And, you know, I'm at the point in my career where people ask me, what was cybersecurity like way back when? And so I kind of show them this, and these were the top 10 mistakes that were made by people in 2001. And as far as I can tell, the only thing is not installing antivirus software. That's the only thing that we've fixed in 2021. Blabbermounts is that you have a file share that's open to the world, or you know, to more people. Then Brad calls this oversharing. You know, that type of stuff. But you know, and I said, what have we been doing the last 20 years that we've not been able to get rid of this? We're making some inroads with password management, but still we still have this big issue. So I'd like to kind of throw this out here just to kind of remind people that you know, we have a lot of work to do. Working from home, I've been Virginia Tech. We've been pretty much working from home since March, and I'm sure most of you have, coming up on a year. And you know, net access is not equal. Some areas have poor internet access. Some areas have no internet access. Tech has made wireless outdoor wireless access available in the commuter parking lots, and we did that. Ironically, it turned out that the people that took advantage of that were more people trying to get net access for their kids to school, for online school. The other thing too is that ISPs, now some ISPs were very nice in the last year, and they basically disabled their rate-based charge structure, you know, where you get so many megabytes a month and then they jack it up. But that's not going to last long. You know, they're going to start charging you for data rates. In fact, they'll probably use that to push you into the higher paying plans for faster internet access, you know, and that type of stuff. My editorial comment that I make there is that if anything, the pandemic has basically proved that net access is a utility and has to be regulated as such. That's just me on there. We can argue about that over beers whenever we can meet for beers again, right? But in the 30 years that I've been doing cybersecurity stuff and looking at all the attacks and that we've seen, you know, people say, well, what are hackers after? And really, it's three things, and two of them involve your data. You know, they want to steal your data, they want to disclose your data, they want to use your machines to attack other sites, that, you know, the well-known attribution problem, and then or they want to destroy your data. You know, ransomware. Ransomware is not new. Ransomware has been around since 1989, and in fact, in 2009. The Virginia State prescription monitoring system was hit with a massive ransomware attack. They demanded, I think it was $10 million to get their data, you know, so the agency could get their data back. And Vita said, no, we're not paying. They went back to you know, their backups. Why is it more popular now? Well, because of cryptocurrency. In 2009, $10 million in unmarked bills was going to be a lot of duffel bags. And you know, everybody in the world was going to be watching to see who picked up those duffel bags, right? So if these are the three main goals of attackers, then this is what we should be defending against. And all the other stuff is when you look at the root cause, and that's the key phrase, when you look at the root cause, it's going to boil down to one of these three. Okay? So down at the bottom of the screen there, Matt Swan created this. This is a variation of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He calls it Maslow's hierarchy of incident response. But this really gives you the strategic level of how the controls can help you in your overall security architecture. You start at the bottom. You have to have inventory. You don't know what you got on connected to your network. It's not going to help you any. And then, so can you name the assets? Can you locate the assets that you're defending inside your corporate or organizational network? That's your bottom layer. The next one up is telemetry. And with the telemetry stuff, can you see those things? Those of you who know me, I hate segmentation. To me, segmentation just is one more thing that I have to manage, and there's always a kink in there somewhere. But that's just me. And even though I hate it, we have at least 8 segments in our corporate network, in our university network here. But you know, we have a wired segment, we have a wireless segment, we have other segments in there. We have one for, you know, sensitive data, but try to keep those segments at a minimum, because stuff has to go through those segments, and that can change, and you really have to keep, you know, up to date and updated as to what changes and what your business needs are. Then the next layer is detection. Can you detect an attack? Can you detect it as close to real time as possible, or are you detecting it like, oh, we just looked through our logs and we saw that something happened 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago? Okay? And then can you classify the attack? Is it an info stealer class of attack? Is it something that's after your data, or is it something that's after your machine? Remember the 3 goals that we talked about in the previous slide. So what type is it there? And then can we identify the class of adversaries, and you know, how skilled are they? Are they script kiddies, or are they more advanced? And then once we've identified that, then are they inside our network? Are they, you know, is it just more than one asset that they've compromised? Are they moving around? Then can you find them, which means goes back to telemetry and inventory. Can you hunt for these guys inside your network once you know that somebody's inside your network? And can you track them? And then what's your countermeasure? You know, the most effective countermeasure is you just disconnect the asset from the net. And you know, that's, I mean, obviously there's things that you have to consider, but if it's not a super critical asset, you know, it's someone's laptop or something like that, you find it, you disconnect it from the net, and you don't let it back on until it's been repaired. So this is a really good way to see how you want to organize your defensive architecture, but also what type of logs do you need to collect, okay? Because you want to be able to answer these questions. That's our goal. Can we do this? Well, we're good on some, and so on others, and on others we absolutely suck at the moment. But that's the way that we can measure our progress there. So where do the critical, you know, security controls, you know, fit in? Well, the big thing now is, right, you know, oh, we got to be compliant with standards. You know, we got to do all this type of stuff. So what's the framework? You know, we want to find a framework that fits. For us, we tie ourselves to ISO 27001 and NIST 853. You know, and then those are the high-level frameworks. The critical security controls are sort of the bridge between the high-level framework and the actual rubber meets the roads commands. But you have to figure out what's the framework that's going to govern your organization. Is it HIPAA? Is it risk? Which one is it? And do you have policies at your site that say this is the framework that we're following? Okay. Once you get on that, then you can map the controls to the framework. And I'll show you a spreadsheet it's a freebie out there. But basically, you know, how can I map a control to a particular framework item? For instance, you know, one that's plaguing the edges now is the new, well, not new anymore, it's about 4 or 5 years, but NIST 800-171, the Control Unclassified Information standard. The critical controls map to 80% of the 114 requirements in NIST 800 in the CUI requirement. In fact, most of the ones that it doesn't map to are the ones that require physical security. But you know, here you've got an example of how I can map the critical controls to particular items. You know, if, for instance, if we're mapping this to the cybersecurity framework that NIST has, okay? So you want to map those controls to the framework, and I'll show you a spreadsheet on how you can do that. It's time for my 5 o'clock robocall. How about that? And then once you've done that, now you got to manage and assess the risk, right? Which ones do we need to do first? Which one are the controls? Which ones are we willing to accept the risk on? And this is just a standard risk practice. ISO 27005, you know, gives you this roadmap here that you can follow. And then you got to measure it. How well are we doing? And this is where we are now. We've got some of the controls. Well, we're doing okay on some and we suck on others, but this is the gap analysis thing. Here they're using the cybersecurity framework, but you can map it to anything you want. And I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. And then you want to just keep monitoring and measure your security, right? And really, inventory of devices is the really big one that you want to worry about. This whole little slide that I'm showing you, there's a poster, and Rob, I'm going to send you the presentation. But if you go to SANS and you look up posters, the SANS website, sans.org, and you look up posters, there's one on the critical security controls, and these charts come from that poster. Okay? So we're talking about gapping it. This is an example of a gap analysis. Auditscripts.com is your friend. Okay, so I'm going to bounce out of the presentation here, and I'm just going to come over here to this guy, and this is auditscripts.com. Free resources. Under the free resources, there's critical security controls. When you click on that, it pulls you down, and here are version 7.1, the latest version that's released of the 20 critical controls. And you can, if you scroll down a little bit, if you want to see the actual document that describes the controls, that's this PDF. But the real value are these 3 spreadsheets. Okay, master mapping, the assessment, and this. The gap analysis that I showed you in the slide, that's off of this tool. But I want to show you the master mapping tool first, because we were talking about moving what standards, what controls map to what standards here. So let me blow this up a little bit here. So for instance, control number 1. So the rows in this spreadsheet are the individual critical security controls, 20 rows, one for each control. The columns are the various standards that have been examined and show the mappings. For instance, so in this one here, control number 1, inventory of your hardware, your authorized and unauthorized devices. In NIST 853 Rev 4, sections CA7, CM8, IA3, SA4, these components of 53 Rev 4 are met by this particular control. Okay. Now, this is 853. We've got the cybersecurity framework, versions 1, 1.0. And then we have 882, the SMB guide, DHS's continuous monitoring, the ISO standards. I said that Virginia Tech Maps is using ISO 27002. These are the 3 areas that this particular control addresses, okay? ISO NIST 800-171, the CUI, NSA, DHS, Australian, top 35 and essential 8, NSA, Canadian, the British ones, GCHQ, UK, PCI, if you're in PCI version 3.2, inventory of hardware deals with section 2.4 of PCI 3.2. You got 3.1, 3.0. You have HIPAA, the HIPAA requirements there. This control maps to that. FFIEC, AICPA, COBIT, and you get the idea. And there's quite a few. SWIFT, there's, for those of you that live in Singapore or Saudi Arabia, those are here. You've got the NERCs and Cloud Security Alliance, FISMA, ITIL, Nevada Gaming, the state of Nevada, the state of Massachusetts, state of New York, Australian, Victorian, and ANSI standards. So all of these standards are now mapped to each of the 20 critical controls. So as you go through this, this is one way that you can show to your auditors and to your management, compliance officers or whatever, that yes, this is the mapping of the controls to whatever particular standard you're using. So this is Auditscripts. This is the master mapping one, okay? The executive assessment one is another example. And this one it's kind of like an executive summary. And what they did here was they looked at the first 6 controls, which are the foundations, and they really quickly simplified it. So for instance, for control number 1, a simple question: has your organization implemented scanning tools, active and passive, to identify all devices attached to the network? And if you come over here, you have a pull down. No, it's not implemented. We have it implemented on some systems, on all systems, or we have it implemented and automated so that it automatically runs every day and it records that data every day. And let's say if I say that, ooh, look at that, it turns it to a nice little green. Okay. Have you, the second question, have you implemented a network port control solution which requires certificates? And you know, maybe for us, we've got that, sorry, well, you see it's yellow there, but we have it on some systems, so a darker yellow. If we had said not implemented, ooh, that's a red, okay? But for us, it's implemented on some. Now, similar questions for these 6. Now you notice this is very, very simple, very straightforward. This is an executive summary, right? This is the stuff that the CEOs you know, want to look at. But it gives you a basic risk calculation. How much of this is accepted and how much of this is addressed. And that's this guy. Where it really gets rough is with the manual assessment tool. And that's because this one will take a lot of time to fill out. So let me zoom this one out here. So it gives you a nice dashboard, but for each control, there's tabs down here at the bottom. And so for each control, you get this type of a thing. You have sub controls here. And so for instance, this very first one, do you utilize an active discovery tool to identify devices connected to your network and update the hardware inventory? So you have that, and you've got some couple of things here. Policy, do you have a policy that requires that control? Is it implemented? Is it automated? And then do the results of your scanning, is that reported to a business unit? And if you come here, you've got individual, you know, so like for us, yes, we have an approved written policy. It is implemented on all systems. It's automated on most systems, and it is reported on most systems. Okay. And you can see how this is going to take some time to fill out, but this is like building a chip. The first chip's going to cost you $1 million, and all the other chips are going to cost you a nickel. But this is what you can use for your gap analysis. And when you're done, you basically have something that gives you this. One for each of the controls, where you stand. It's got a 6 Sigma style maturity ratings here, level 1 through 5 on the 6 Sigma scale. And it gives you a little bit of your maturity levels. Okay. And when you do your first one, it's going to suck. So, you know, we had a baseline of, you know, 40%, and anything under 40% we had to work on. Anything above 40% we said was good for now. But this is the type of simple, and this is already built for you. It's free. You can go to Auditscripts.com, download those free spreadsheets, and away you go. Right. The way the 7.1 controls are organized is into what we call these implementation groups. IG1s are basically real small, you know, limited size. You may have one person working IT, or you may have contracted that out. A small business is there. Limited resources, that's an IG1. On the other end of the scale, you know, are people like Cricital that are mature organizations, have resources that you can throw at this, and that would be an IG3. Okay? And in between is the IG2. So they call these implementation groups to sort of say, these are things at a minimum, right? You'd say, well, there's 20 controls. Where do I start? Well, it doesn't matter whether you're an IG1, 2, or 3. At a minimum, you should be doing the IG1s, which are basically the first 6 controls. And so what we have there is in this basic set, right? We have this basic set of controls. 1 through 6, your hardware inventory, software inventory, continuous vulnerability management, controlled use of admin privileges, secure configurations for your workstation servers and applications, and then your logging. The way we started was we did these 6, and then we did control number 13, which is data protection, and we did control number 18, which is application software security. So those became our foundational 8 out of the 20 that we did. But this is how it's organized by that. Very simply, there's 2 loops. One is the alert or reporting loop, and it looks like this. You've got some data that comes in, for instance, a SIM. You've got a help desk or your SOC is looking at it. And if it's a help desk item, it's referred to the help desk. If it's a security thing, it goes to your security team. You may have analytics group that needs to collect information and data about things that are collected. That's what I would call this alerting and reporting loop. But on the other side here, and that's this cloud here on the left. When you look at a diagram like this, the way I tell students in the SANS class for this class, I said, look at each of these little sections and ask yourself, who in my organization is responsible for PKI? Who in my organization does the network level authentication? Asset inventory database. This could be not only your networking group, not only your systems group, or not only your departmental IT admins, but this could be your basic property inventory group, the ones that slap that barcode that says property of on your devices. So it's not just an IT database. It can be your purchasing. You go and find out what was bought, what equipment was bought, and who bought it, and who paid for it. So you have that. Who runs your active discovery tools? Something like a NetScan. Who does passive? Something like looking at the switch and router memory and dumping your CAM memory back to a database. Who does that? Okay. So as you look at these little diagrams, you ask yourself, who in my organization does it? Is it my unit? So for us at Virginia Tech, my office runs the active device discovery. The networking group does the passive device discovery because they're cost recovery. So then once you identify who has the information you need, then this is where the interesting stuff happens. Now you need to negotiate with them to get copies of the data that they're collecting. And that's the bureaucratic, well, I don't know, what do you want my data for? That type of stuff. So there's a lot of politicking that's got to be done there. But inventory is, I think a lot of you are using some sort of a, like Clean Access or ClearPath or some sort of, tool for your NAC to get on the network. And you think, well, I know where it is. Yeah. Well, here's what the problem is. It's this simple question. Given an IP address, can you locate it and find the owner? And how long does it take you to locate it and find the owner? And there's 2 parts to this. Given an IP address, about an event that happened within the last 24 hours or an event that happened 2 weeks ago. So where do you see this a lot? We see this coming into our abuse at vt.edu or your abuse at whatever your organization is. For instance, let's say that a scanner here at Virginia Tech detects a machine inside your network, or company network, that is attacking us. So we gather some logs. It's got the IP address, internal IP address for you. It's got our IP address. And we send to your abuse at whatever your company name is. We said, hey guys, we detected this machine that belongs to you attacking us. Here's some sample representative logs. Well, given that information, you want to find the machine that's causing the problem because you got a problem, okay? But the problem is, of course, that either we didn't detect it until 2 weeks later, or we were so backlogged that we finally got around to sending that email. So now it becomes, how long is it going to take you to find it? Well, okay, IPv4. general categories. It's either a wired address or a wireless address. And you go, well, we know who did that because, you know, they have to register their username. I get that part. You got the person, but the machine, remember that third-party software, whatever you use, ClearPath, whatever, it works off of an address pool that's generated by your networking. And so, you know, and this is where segmentation comes in. For instance, in our case, well, you know, are we using network address translation? Are we using port address translation? Turns out, we found out we're using both. And the networking guys decide that when the network gets a capacity gets to a certain level, they switch to PAT. So now, you know, and what does PAT mean? So in my web server log, right? Let's assume that you don't have any segments in there. It's just your machine is directly addressable. What would show up on my web server log is very simply the IP address of the machine inside your network. Pretty easy for you to find. If you've segmented and you created a NAT inside your corporate network to hide from the internet, which by the way never works because we can find your machine regardless of whether you've got NAT or not. But you know, if it's NATed, then what's going to show up on my log is going to be probably the address of your proxy machine, right? And now you have to look at your proxy address logs to see what machine was connected at that time. Now that may be an IP address, or if you're using PAT, it's going to be the same IP address but a different port. And so, are you keeping those logs? And how long do you keep those logs? Okay. So when you're segmenting, you got this bridging stuff that you got to worry about, NAT or PAT. You know, and I just for simplifying, for simplicity's sake in this diagram, the wireless addresses could be just as easily DHCP. Here I just said, okay, if it's a wire and it's static, you got that. How's the address generated? You know, what's your subnet mask and all that type of stuff. If it's DHCP, okay, I got that. What are your DHCP lease times? If your lease times are like an hour or 4 hours or something like that, and I send you logs for something that happened, let's say yesterday, now you've got to look and see if you've got those DHCP mappings as the machine gets a new leased address. Okay? Or, I mean, and you can fix all of this with your DHCP configuration, but my point here is that to get the address and the username, it's going to depend a lot on how your networking guys create the address pools that your tools use. Okay? So this is one of the big challenges that's hit us. And it's worse for us because we're running IPv6 as well as v6. Okay? So, you know, we have this type of thing here, all right? Now, work from home has really messed things up. I'm doing this from home, but it's a presentation from home. The IP address of this machine is not a Virginia Tech IP address. It's the address for my ISP. You may or may not have visibility over that. You know, how do I scan that if I don't have an agent running on my machine? Oh, well, Randy, we'll put you on the VPN. Okay, that's great, you know. But as we were just talking about before the presentation, depending on the tool, it's going to pull everything else from your home network. The other defensive thing that we had that's very effective when it's inside our borders is to disconnect the machine from the network. Okay, but you can't really disconnect the machine that doesn't belong to you in the sense of its IP address isn't one of yours. To disconnect my machine from the internet, you can kill my access to the VPN, and that'll prevent me from using an internal Virginia Tech address. But if I've already got the data on the machine, you have not removed my access from the internet. And to do that, that requires my ISP to cut me off. And you talking to an ISP saying, cut this person off, that's a whole bunch of, you know, can of worms that we don't want to go in, right? And so, you know, all this other devices can wind up in your host inventory. I laugh when I saw this slide because, you know, Sony's Android TV, LifeSmart's a light bulb, and those of you may remember the Dynet attack a couple of years ago, where light bulbs and surveillance cameras were used to do a massive denial of service attack against them. There's a rolling bot, which, for those of you that are Star Wars fans, hey, it's here already. Dyson has a fan, a pure cool link a purifier fan, light switches, that we've seen here. The robot vacuum cleaners, washing machines and refrigerators that get, hooked onto the net. There's actually a styler closet that organizes your closet. And, let's not even bother what the Toto is for the doo-doo, there. And then you have wireless cameras. And all of these things can show up in your inventory, but they're not under your control. And yet these are potential vectors in. Somebody could compromise a light bulb and gain access to your machine, which has VPN access into your corporate network. That's an extreme example, but my point is, there's a lot of other stuff that's at home now that complicates this inventory problem. Same thing with software. Again, how many of you are doing whitelisting? Who maintains a software inventory database? Is it your Active Directory, your enterprise admins, your domain admins? What tools are you using to do software inventory? Right? And so, what happens to your software inventory if it's your home computer? This is my home computer. I got a bunch of other stuff that's on that machine that's not company related, and it doesn't need to be in your software inventory. Okay, will Active Directory work on a machine that's outside of your corporate network? What about two-factor authentication? What about software licensing? Is it general enough to count for those type of things? And VPNs themselves, that can be problematic there. So these are some of the questions you have to ask yourself now that we're in this work from home environment. The third one, I jumped a little bit ahead, right? Because data is really the key. We're really, our main goal is to protect our institutions or companies' sensitive data, whatever it is. Whatever data is regulated by law, covered by law or regulation, that's really, those are the crown jewels. And so, doing an inventory, Spirion, which used to be called Identity Finder, and please, if you know of a better tool, let me know. But it still seems to be the only good sensitive data search tool. Before you can protect your sensitive data, you've got to find it. And so that's part of this inventory challenge that we have there. Continuous vulnerability scans, nice inside your network. We were just talking about this, a little bit earlier. What about, outside? Will your ISP interpret a vulnerability scan that you're making to be an attack and block it? Some ISPs will. Some ISPs don't like it when you do that type of stuff. So, can you run a pen test against a machine that's not inside your network, that's in a home network? So these are things you need to consider that work from home has created, right? Maybe if you've got a client that or a product that issues a pull request, that the device here at home says, hey, scan me, so that the ISP sees that the scanning activity was initiated by someone inside the net. Maybe not. That's one way to avoid this. But this is something that we discovered in our in the last year or so. Admin privilege. We can talk about this till it freezes over. I have what most people consider to be a very controversial view, because we've been heavily BYOD for the last 40 years, 40 years. Yeah. People already have admin privilege. Somebody using their home computer, they have admin privilege. I do not mind someone having control admin privilege on a company machine if, and this is the big capital if, blinking lights, if that person gets some sort of training, even on basic use, how to install software, what you have to do, look at your logs, make sure that there's no accounts there, you know, blah, blah, blah. If you give that person training, and they may object, and you know what, you say, if you don't do this training, you don't get admin privilege, okay? And it doesn't have to be a 5-day thing. You can compact a lot into an hour, right? But anyway, it's complicated as we have moved to this work from home. So, you know, now does your home computer meet the regulatory requirements that you have to meet if you're using sensitive data out there? You know, work computers, okay, you sort of think that, but now, you know, some of these standards, which don't really reflect the real world, they impose restrictions on networks. Well, the network's not yours, it's the ISP. So these are things that you have to worry about. One thing that we recommend is that if you do have to use your home computer to do office work, is to create a separate user ID on your home computer and use that user ID for work. That separates things like your browser history, your photos, your personal sensitive data stuff. And it, in a sense, it limits the damage that can be done by a ransomware attack, in that that account can only get to files that that account has access to, okay? And then whenever we get out of this pandemic thing and you decide I'm never going to use my home computer again, then you just delete that user ID. But I would really recommend this type of an approach. It helps you with logging. It separates browser history and all this type of stuff. You know, that could be you know, privacy leaks. Okay? Secure configuration. This is the you must be this tall to play in our network. We stole a bunch of standards from Stanford University, and basically it's this. And the URL for this is in the slides, but you can see this. And so what we did here was we reflected the sensitivity of the device, an endpoint or an application or a server. We married that to the type of data that was being used or processed by that device. If you had low risk data, public data, then your minimum security standards are what's in the yellow here in this column. Patches, antivirus software, backups, registering it with your inventory system, host space firewall, make sure it goes through surplus, and credentials and access control. But if you had high risk data, you had those, plus you had some other requirements in there. And then the blue gives us the critical security control that maps to this particular requirement. So, and this is free. You can go out to this website and let me bounce out here just for a second. Collapse. Come over here. I'll put the URL for the policy things. So this is the minimum security standard. And I'll put this in the chat window. Where's the chat window? Where did the chat window go? I'm going to stop my share for a minute. Oh, there it is. I'm going to go back and share. So in the chat window, I put the URL for our minimum security standards. These are minimum security standards. We have it for endpoints, and we define what they are. We have it for servers, we have what they are, and we have it for applications. And it's all geared on the sensitivity of the data that's being handled by that machine. Okay. So that's what this is. Okay. And this is control 5. Okay. And then we have logs, your SIMs, you know, whether you use Splunk or whether you use homegrown or elk. It doesn't matter, you know, QRadar, it doesn't matter. You want to be able to collect logs. And so again, in the work from home world, what type of visibility do you have? You know, you may or may not have good visibility on logs, transaction logs, just depends. But these are things that you need to worry about. And do you have a logging standard? At the URL that I gave you, if you chop off the PDF part, we do have a logging standard that tells what should be logged. Okay, so that's something that you want to have there. As an example of logging, when we went to work from home last spring break, we went out and this is off of our elk stack. We were tracking login locations. Now this is not precise location as where you live, but this is basically the city where your ISP is registered. But we were, we needed to know where, where were people coming from, students and faculty. And this is, I can blow this up if I had the real website up to see a worldwide view. But, this gives us an idea of where faculty and staff are. It really was kind of funny because I was talking to one faculty member who's on a committee with me, and we were talking about something, and he made something reference about, it being morning, and so I realized that he was in a different time zone, and I said, well, where are you now? He says, oh, I'm in Wyoming, so you have this type of capability. Here we're logging by time of day and what town inside of Virginia they're coming from. Blacksburg, Christiansburg, Roanoke, Virginia Beach, those type of things. But this is the type of stuff that you can use with your logs. Now, boundary defense. Again, those of you that know me, I don't believe in corporate boundaries. Again, because being focused on preventing people from getting inside your network, I would tend to look at it as the other way around. Keep unauthorized people, keep people from going to unauthorized sites outbound. But again, work from home has blown up your border. Now that we've got mobile, I call this Internet 3, right? We've got containers, we've got cloud, containers and serverless and cloud. We've got mobile phones, laptops, tablets. We got Internet of Things, industrial control systems. What really this has forced us to realize that data and your identity have become the new borders. I should be able to get to my data regardless of where I am. And that includes my authentication thing. So federated identity things is now, where we're heading. The edges, we use a thing called Eduroam, for instance, for wireless access. I go visit Radford, and I can log into Radford's Eduroam network using my Virginia Tech credentials because we are sharing that information. They get a log that I logged in, and Virginia Tech gets a log entry that I logged in. And so if I go to Stanford or UCLA or any of the other universities in the country, or they come visit us, same thing, they can connect to our network using their credentials. We've seen this happening with all sorts of federated data, right? You see this now, new applications that you buy, and they say, do you want to log in with your Google ID or your Facebook ID? So this is where, this federation stuff is moving in. But to me, it's, data and identity are now the new borders there. So rubber meets the road. This is all really nice and well, but, where do I get the actual commands to do stuff? Well, these are the CIS benchmarks. One of the things that I was on the original volunteer teams that built these things 20 years ago. But you have benchmarks for a wide variety of things. Here I just picked the Linux ones, but these have all the how to, if you need to disable your logs, you would get the how-to commands. So how do you do this? Well, you pick the appropriate benchmark, which you've mapped to some sort of framework, and then you open up a CIS benchmark document, and you literally cut the command out of the benchmark document and paste it into a flat file. So, for instance, this is an example of one of the Linux security benchmarks. Here, we're ensuring permissions on etcmotd, message of the day. And so to check it, you run this stat command, but to remediate it, you run these two, the change own and change mod commands to set the permissions correctly. Well, what I would do is I would cut these two commands out of this and paste it into a text file. And then I would go through each of the requirements on the benchmark, cutting and pasting as I need it. And at the end, I have a configuration script that if I changed it to executable, to be executable, I got myself a bash script that will change all the security settings to what I need. Okay. So here I'm working off of my data. I got some server. I got regulations that deal with that data. I got, the 20 critical controls. I go to the benchmark and I look up the commands that I need. And from the benchmark, then I build the security configuration script, which then, right, I install the operating system, I install the patches, I install the applications, I install the application patches, I run a localization script for, whatever your environment is, and then I run this security configuration script. And then that generates a base image, a gold image, if you will, that I can use when I'm, populating new devices, okay? It's already configured that way. So I mentioned version 8. So here's a sneak peek. The version 7 controls are shown here on the right-hand side. The new version 8 control numbers are shown here on the left-hand side. And you'll notice that we are now, version 8 will have 18 controls, not 20. We combined a couple of things. If you remember, control number 10, you had these guys all set up, data recovery, those things became there. So what we have now is, the new version 8, and actually this has changed from the picture. Control 13, which was data protection, here, which was under version 8, it was first assigned control number 6. Under version 7, it was control number 13. But data protection is now, this actually got moved to control number 3, and these guys all got pushed up by 1. Because what we wanted to do was we have an inventory of hardware, an inventory of software, and an inventory of data. What disappeared? Well, control 11 and wireless access control, those basically disappeared and got combined into basically the secure configuration for assets there. Okay. So the new one's now inventory comment, and the new one is this new control here, number 15, service provider management. This is for cloud applications, Amazon, Azure, GC3, those type of things in there. That's the new one that is in there to reflect, that things have been changed. And as you can see, under the old version 7, the current version 7, we didn't have anything like that. Some of the names have changed. So inventory, hardware assets, software, these really have changed. but configuration of assets, network infrastructure, applications, and all that type of stuff, we took a bunch of controls and combined them into that, okay? And then account management, we combined admin privileges and account monitoring and control, right? Yeah. I hope it's not bothering you guys too much there. My wife will be in just a minute. So some of these we combined controls into one. Here, 12, 13, and 14 really got combined into this data protection one. So this is how we collapsed some of it from 20 to 18. Okay, and so this is going to be announced. I think it's in April when they'll come out with this new configuration stuff. Okay. So again, the service provider management deals with cloud services, and the Center for Internet Security has what we call companion guides, and there is one on cloud companion guides there. Okay. So we still, the current 20 critical and the 18, we're trying to find a snazzy term for the 18, Elite 8, Elite 18. Got to find something that works with that and see what goes on there. But again, we're trying to see what it is, but it still it provides a great bridge between the frameworks and the actual rubber meets the roads. It's something that auditors can use and love, and they can go from there. So let me stop here with the share and see if anything. I'm just looking at the star. Excuse me, at the chat window here to see. So working backwards, yeah, keep unauthorized access out. Right. Yeah, get your home network in order. Yeah, VPN tunnel. Comcast address only changes if your modem's offline for a while. Yeah, I mean that's, you know, Starlink. Yeah, and some of the ISPs are now doing IPv6 only. So that changes things. But again, the whole idea behind that is that address space isn't yours. You can't disconnect a home network machine without going through the ISP for that particular machine. Any other questions?
Well, I'll just say this, Randy. It was interesting as I was watching you go through the Excel spreadsheet, because I actually used that. If you remember, I was Carillion's first network security guy back in the day. And I actually used that very same Auditscripts. I think it wasn't this last version, it was a couple of versions before.
Yeah.
But it was as a result of that I was able to get some of the funding, and we're actually able to improve our staff and get additional funding for the staff just because of that. So for anybody that's out there looking for, because at that point we didn't have a lot of tools, didn't have a lot of ways to even get tools.
Right.
And that actually helped fund the program, because we were able to specifically go through that whole measurement exercise and demonstrate, hey, look, you guys have put in a lot of money for these areas, and you can see that demonstrated as we went through this. All those areas are really good, but here's the other areas that we didn't do. We didn't invest any money, and look, the graph clearly shows we need help in these areas, because we did okay over here, but over here we need some additional assistance. So I just wanted to reiterate that is something that for real that's a real world example of using that very spreadsheet to get funding and get cash and increase the security program as a result of that. So
yeah, no manager likes to see that thing below 50%. They don't like that at all. I'm curious, how long did it take you to go through the whole big assessment spreadsheet?
It took about when they went to 7.1, they really did increase it a lot.
Right.
So I think this was like either 6.5 or maybe even was 7, and it wasn't quite as intense. Yeah. But it took us about a month and a half to walk through the whole process.
Yeah, okay, that's about
right. But I tell you, it was so awesome, because I'm sitting in the the CIO's office. This was even before we had a CISO, and I'm sitting there, and you could just see he just kind of going, oh wow, okay, graphs mean everything, man.
Yep.
So that's just a real world example of something that we were able to do and use, and so it worked out really well for us. So
yeah, we simplified it a little bit and kind of did an executive version of that, but same effect. Nobody likes to see anything low, and because you collected that first one and you do it however regularly, annually or semi-annually, you can show the progress. If you had 12 out of the 20 were below 40%, and then the next time you did an assessment, only 10 out of the 20 were below 40%. You can show progress in the jacking everything up. So any other questions? Or
I got one more question for you, Randy.
Yeah.
And I think I wish I had the ability to run a survey, because I'd really like to see what the rest of the population would say about this. But so don't answer right away, because I want it to be a thought-provoking question.
Okay.
So what is more important? What's more important to your organization, a hardware inventory or a pen test? What if I'm walking into an organization, what's the most important thing, a pen test or a hardware inventory?
Okay.
So I'll let them stew on that one and see if we get any chat activity there.
As I
I'm
play the
curious.
Jeopardy theme, you know. Do 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 do.
Yeah, right. And nobody wants to answer. Inventory by far. Accurate inventory. Oh, wow. So yeah. So got a few people. The general consensus, I think, is inventory. A couple of people saying that it's pen test. So Randy, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Rob's inventory. You don't know what's breached if you don't know what you have.
I agree completely.
You know,
That's why it's critical security control number one, right?
yeah. And like I said, the key to that, and this was a mistake I made in the beginning, was I knew that the networking guys, allocated addresses out, but I didn't dig into how and what type of allocations they were doing. And so, all of a sudden we get a notice about something that happened, a month ago, and we're trying to track back. And when we find the machine, the logs say it was a Mac, and we're looking at a Linux server, and the guy said, no, this has always been a Linux server. But that network address translation and port address translation was the real surprise for us. And so make sure that you talk to your networking guys and ask them how they do this, and see what's going on, because DHCP lease times, you may, somebody may have gotten the ad. I mean, it doesn't usually, that's rare, but somebody may have gotten an address that was used in an attack. And if you don't know that the address actually got changed, it actually was on a different machine, you may cut off the wrong machine.
Does anybody else have any questions for Randy? Because this is an excellent opportunity to ask him all kinds of cool things.
Not really. Well, I don't know. It might be a question. This is Doug. I know from my point of view, inventory, having that accurate inventory is 100%, that's key. But also when it comes to our vulnerability scanning, authenticated scans are definitely key.
Yep.
But I get it. You're in an environment. I mean, I know you manage environments at Virginia Tech that you do manage, or that you have teams that manage them.
Sure.
But what about when it comes to like systems that you don't have that kind of management over, like, students' laptops and systems that are brought into the Virginia Tech network? I mean, I'm pretty sure you see a lot of like various activity, but I mean, when you're talking about protecting, I guess that's where you come from with the protecting data from going
right.
Right? Yeah. So that makes sense.
And ironically, everybody says, oh, the student machines are going to be the hotbed of, hacker activity. No, it does. Yes, certainly somebody falls for a fish, but it's probably more, university-owned machines that are getting whacked than student machines. And again, from my standpoint as the CISO, if a student machine gets hacked and there's no sensitive data on that machine, as far as I'm concerned, we just kill that machine, keep it from connecting back to the network until the student fixes it. Okay. If there's sensitive data on that machine, then that invokes our, sensitive data protocol, and we have to look at network forensics and all this other stuff. But even then, what is like a credit card number or something like that would be on a student machine or an individually owned machine, it's going to be that person's credit card number. It's not going to be my credit card number or your credit card number. It's a onesie twosie type thing. And the other thing is, Matt from Radford, you may have the same thing. Usually freshmen and sophomores, they don't have admin privileges on the laptops that they bring home. We go to them and say, what's your administrator password? And they go, I have to call my dad or my mom, because the parents have that. So it's not until they get to be juniors or seniors that, here, daughter, here's the keys to the car now, but we
have plenty of students that have to call home for their Radford account password, let alone,
yeah, absolutely, so it's not the dangerous thing that everybody thinks it is. And what it's done, again, in hardware inventory is good, For me personally, I would do hardware inventory and then I would do data inventory. Then I'd do software because I need to know, and this is a big challenge for us, is where the hell is the data? You know, oh, well, we have these big database engines. Yeah, okay, but then somebody got pissed off because they have to log in 5 times to get to the data. So they did an extract of that data element and put it on their departmental machine that's local to them. It's a university-owned machine, so everything's okay, but it's not in that main, machine anymore. So when we do our security reviews, or we ask people to run identity, Spirion, what used to be Identity Finder, to find if there's sensitive data on the machine. So because that's what's going to cost us money. I mean, Rob at Carillion, a machine gets popped, but there's no valuable data on it. That's a different class of response than if all of a sudden you realize that, oh crap, it has credit card numbers or billing information or health information, there. So knowing where that sensitive data, and everybody's got, sensitive data. We broke down our data classifications. I think we had 5 classifications. We broke it down to 3. We have high, moderate, and low. And in our definition, high risk data is any data covered by law or regulation and requires us to self-report either to the individuals affected or to some regulatory agency. And then a parallel standard says that data, high risk data, has to be encrypted at rest or in transit. So a machine gets popped and it's a university owned machine. First thing we ask is there sensitive data on that machine? Run identity, sorry, I'm going to say Identity Finder because I'm hooked up on that. So you run Identity Finder, and if there's no sensitive data on the machine, then it's a wipe, reinstall, repatch, fix the problem, bring the machine back up online. If it had sensitive data, then the question is, and it found it, then that tells us that the data was not encrypted at rest because Identity Finder found it. And now we have to look at network forensics. Where did the outbound traffic? Did that machine send anything outside of Virginia Tech's network? Or did we just see, was it a 10 meg spreadsheet or database that had sensitive data in the clear, but we only see 1K of traffic, maybe once a month going out? Then we would say, for instance, that might be a near miss, that it was just a phone home to the bad boy site. On the other hand, if we see 100 meg of traffic leave, and then we say the probability of an exfil is very high.
Randy, hang on one second. So we are 10 minutes over our normal 1 hour time frame. So, but hold on, don't go anywhere. So I am going to continue to let the conference run because I don't really want to stop what we've got going on. But if you need to leave or if you've got other things, please feel free to bow out. We appreciate you being here. And so next month, I'm going to have Rod Perry from Carillion, the CISO from Carillion, talking. Not sure what the subject matter is going to be, but if you have attended any of his presentations, like the Cyberchain one or any of these other ones, it was really cool. So I'm sure it'll be something really cool. Not to mention the fact that he's my boss, so I have to say it's going to be really cool. But anyway, so if you need to drop, feel free. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to let Randy talk. So good to have you guys, and we're just going to keep going until we stop. So with that, I also wanted to mention one other thing, Randy, was something that you said or somebody that somehow or other I attributed back to you, or at least your organization. And that is taking the user to the data rather than taking the data to the user. And what I mean by that is the cloud, for instance, right? So one interesting thing that I found about college students, and this probably goes back to Matthew as well, a college student leaving Radford, my daughter's currently attending JMU, everything they do is online, right? Like whether she's at home, working from home, or whether she's at JMU on campus, everything's online. Everything is stored online. So she can be anywhere, access her documents, send them in, do whatever, right? And so Google Docs or whatever it is that we're using. So the impression is that when it's such a paradigm shift for these college kids moving into the corporate infrastructure, and now they're being told, oh, no, that's not how we do things here, right? Now we have to do everything in the network, right? And so this really, I think that there's a real paradigm shift that's going to start occurring as these college kids that are so used to being in the cloud are beginning to take positions of leadership, and now they're going to start going, no. Let me explain to you how this works. No, we're moving to the cloud, and the data, rather than taking the data to the user, we're going to just use screen paints, keyboard strokes, and we're going to leave the data where it is and interact with the data virtually so that the data never leaves the boundary. And therefore, to your point, there is no boundary anymore, right? I don't care how you access it. You can use a malware-laden Chromebook or whatever, because you're not really touching the data. What you're really doing is just interacting with it, but you never really touch it. You never really hold on to it. You're just virtually touching it. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I mean, how we stumbled onto that problem, the very same problem that you did, was we did a simple tabletop exercise, and we said, because we're trying to figure out what was cloud-based, all the services that we have that were cloud-based. And so it was a very simple premise. We lose connection to the internet. The internal network stays up. Everybody can talk to each other, but what services were impacted if we were inside Virginia Tech's network and we lost connection? And so, I figured, okay, we're going to lose email because we use Gmail and Office 365. Turns out that purchasing with SideQuest, we use them, they're external. I mean, there was a ton of a course management system where student Canvas or Blackboard, that's outside of our borders. And so I was freaking out. I was going, holy crap, we're dead in the water if this happens. Well, we had some of the grad students, from the lab participating, and they said, oh, that's not a problem at all. I just go home and log into the internet from home. And because our credentials are good for 7 days. So, the only thing, because Duo for us, right, that's outside of our border of the network. So they're like, no, it's not a problem. We figure, if you're not back up in 7 days, something is really wrong. But no, you hit it on the thing. And when he said, when she said that to me in the tabletop, I went, wait, we're looking at this completely wrong. And now work from home, I'm accessing my files and stuff like that. And I'm not really going through the network, the university network. I can get to it without having to go through the VPN.
And I think that's probably one of the things that we're beginning to see as well, is that as we are moving into O365 and OneDrives and things like this, it's so funny because I was doing a whole bunch of stuff one day as I was working from home. And then I went to access like my QRadar server, which does sit on-prem, right? And I popped it in. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I can't get to it. What's going on? And I'm like trying to run all these diagnostics. And it took me like 5 minutes to realize, oh, I forgot to turn on my VPN.
Yep.
And so it's like, man, I've been doing all this stuff interactively, was doing it all just on the internet with no issues at all. And then it wasn't until I actually had to access something on-prem before I actually realized that, I need to actually turn it on.
I see Tom Ack says, yeah, I totally have a question. I don't know if you're still on or not, Tom.
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Actually, you had said something, and it really caught me off guard because I'd never really even thought of it that way. That it was more important for you to be able to block traffic that was unauthorized access going out versus blocking it coming in, and that you have more control over that's leaving your network. Because I mean, the surface area of everything coming in, I mean, that's huge. It could come from anywhere, stuff that you didn't even consider.
Yeah.
So,
I mean,
how would you do that?
so a couple of ways. Number one, that relies on threat intelligence. So if you're using what Cisco calls it umbrella now. It used to be OpenDNS or Farsight Technologies, or the freeware version is called RPZ, Response Policy Zones, DNS RPZ. We call it a DNS firewall, but there you're relying on threat intel feeds to say these domains are bad. Okay, and a lot of malware now does DNS lookups to phone home, right? So if the domain that it's trying to connect to is a bad domain and it's in our forbidden zone, if you will, when it does a DNS lookup, our DNS server literally lies and says host not found. And then it logs that fact that this IP address inside our network did this lookup, and now we know, hey, somebody inside our network just did a lookup to a bad site. It's probably popped, and let's go find it. So
Okay, that's cool.
yeah, so Cisco Umbrella, Farsight Technologies, those are the two commercial ones I know of, or DNS RPZ. If you look that up, you can do it. The beauty of that is it's even more now. So Alex Stamos, who used to be the CISO at Yahoo and Facebook and all these other places, a couple of years ago, he wrote an essay called "Why Firewalls Are Obsolete," which of course caught my attention. But his point was that, you know, for us, like at Virginia Tech, we have 100 gig outbound connection to the internet, okay? And we have 100 gig backbone. And his point was, we can't afford an inline 100 gig firewall or IDS or DLP. And he did the math. It was something like it takes 7.5 microseconds to do a deep packet inspection. And otherwise, if you can't do that in that 7.5 microseconds at 100 gig, you're going to impact performance. And that's anathema, right? Nobody's going to let you impact your network speeds because you got to do deep packet inspection. So his point was that we have to go into sample mode or use other techniques. And this DNS tech, you know, I mean, are there ways to get around it? Sure, there are. But profile your traffic. It's really kind of interesting to see, you know, what we're talking about. Inbound, outbound connections. It's crazy.
And what were that was what DNS RPZ?
RPZ, yeah.
And what was the other one? I'm looking both of these.
Farsight Technologies, I think, and then
OpenDNS or
yeah,
Umbrella.
it used to be OpenDNS, and then Cisco bought it, and they call it Umbrella now. So
I still use OpenDNS for home.
yeah,
So it's, if the home version is OpenDNS, the corporate version is Umbrella.
yeah.
Okay. Now I was reading an article out there. I saw it the other day, and it was about DNS revolvers. That's a big threat. That's an issue out there. That, you know, somebody that's like poisons your DNS and, you know, corrupts from inside. So
Yeah.
I thought.
Yeah, I see something here. Aaron put pi-hole.net. Yeah, that's another good resource for home networks and things like that.
So Randy, I wanted to circle back around to what you said earlier, unless you want to go ahead and continue.
No, go ahead.
So you were talking about, you know, probably more important than inventory of software is inventory of data. And so, sure, we started working on that on servers and workstations. That's its own thing. But what we've recently kicked off a project for is with all of our vendor contracts. Like, because every single time I get notified that, or reading the news that this vendor was breached, I'm like, oh, that's one of our 200 contracts that we have an integration with somebody. I need to know. I need to have a place to look immediately to know what type of data I have with that vendor, so I know what all do I need to drop. This is my next biggest issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm putting something here in the chat window. So if you Google Educause HECVAT, HECVAT, it's the Higher Education Cloud Vulnerability Assessment Tool. I think that's what it stands for. But it was a first step in shared assessment. So it's a questionnaire that you're going to buy a piece of software, and you give this questionnaire to the software vendor, and it's got general stuff like, what do you do with our data? Are you storing it in the cloud? Are you storing it inside the continental US? You know, all this type of stuff, general questions. And then we use that to sort of inform the buyer here on campus that, hey, it's a good product, but you're going to need to get some additional software because these guys, only allow 8-character passwords or, whatever. Because I'm not going to tell, and I know people kind of freak out. I said, look, I'm not going to tell a business unit in the university that they can't buy a piece of software that helps them do their job. I am going to tell them that this has flaws, and if you're going to use this piece of software, you have to get these additional things. But I'm not, everybody has a hotel conference center, right? And all the universities. There's only 3 vendors that make hotel management software packages, and they all 3 of them have flaws in them. Okay, so I'm not going to tell the conference center people, no, you can't use any of those 3 because they'll give me the one finger salute and use them anyway. But I will say you've got to segment your hotel network, your guest network from your management network, from your restaurant bar network, that type of stuff, and get these additional things. Then you can use it before you connect to our network. But Matt, you're right. I mean, that knowing what you're buying, it's. I wish there was a, almost like a car and driver magazine review. The 1978 Ford Pinto is a death trap. Don't buy it.
Well, so it's deeper than that in some ways a lot of the times, because it's up to the business owner what data they're giving it. So as part of like our database integration team, we're starting to have an audit and approval process. Anytime, a data export changes, I need to know, did you just decide yesterday you're going to send this company socials? I was like, because I need to know that. Like, again, I might not say no, but we might need to have a little bit more scrutiny, and I at least need to know when they're the next New York Times story.
A simple question. A simple question is basically, do you encrypt the data that we give you? And if they say yes, then the next question we ask them is, what encryption algorithm are you using? Is it is it approved? And we've had vendors tell us, oh, it's proprietary.
It's a roll your own.
Right, run away. You clearly don't understand.
It's base 64. It's base 64.
Yeah, base 64. Yeah. That's when you just kind of want to go, what are you doing to me? Yeah, I mean, you just have to, kind of have to just say, no, we're not going to use that,
Well, one thing that's important about a vendor relationship is that, and I think TJ Maxx probably is, I always use them as the classic example of this, was, it was one of their partners that ended up causing the breach, but at the end of the day, it was TJ Maxx that got breached, right?
Yeah.
It was the vendor that was the root cause, but at the end of the day, it was TJ Maxx. Doesn't matter who the vendor is. So I've always said, for our own relationships, it doesn't matter if our partner gets breached that had Carillion data, right? It'll be Carillion that got breached.
Right.
It doesn't matter how it happened. At the end of the day, we're the ones holding the bag.
Yeah.
That's what we try to underscore in our system owner training, is that, if you go out here and skip all of our processes and tell students they need to go use this system, and they enter in all their information and grades and all this information, and they get compromised, that's still our responsibility as an institution.
Right. To really kind of freak you out, I just put a link in here. This is, oh shoot, I do it to everybody. No, sorry, hang on. Everybody in the meeting, here we go. This is an opinion thing that came in the New York Times a couple of days ago. They're talking about how they track the people who stormed the Capitol. But the scary part, there's a figure in there down the road that let me share my screen real quick.
Didn't they go through like people's phone data and then like talk to bank accounts to see if they bought stuff in that area or something?
Well, actually, Uber used to do that. That's how the one thing that they didn't do when Uber was first starting is they didn't want, you know, law enforcement cops to be in the car because Uber at that time was operating illegally. So they looked at credit card things and saw where certain people, you know, that they knew were policemen bought stuff, and then they used those credit cards to say, oh, when you made a, you know, register for an Uber ride, you know, they would know it was a cop. This is just one of the diagrams, but I'm scrolling down here. They actually got one guy who was in the Capitol, who they interviewed, and you know, here you could see where he went, how he drove from his home in Kentucky to Washington D.C., and where he went around. You know, Hotel Regency, Hyatt Regency at 1:48, and then he's in the Capitol at 3 p.m. But and then these are other people that you know where they drove by tracking their app. This is looking at apps, but this is the scary part here. Let me see. Let me. Okay. So it's this thing here, how you could identify pings. So a marketing database on an app that was on the phone, right? That gives you your a mobile ad ID, and then you got first name, last name, and home address. Well, that ad ID gets sold to someone else, an app database, and in that app database, you not only do you have, you know, they collect phone number, email address, and app name, which then you have an anonymous location database, which has your precise location, date, and time, and you can use these three things to build this new database that has first name, last name, home address from the marketing database, these three from the phone app database, and these three from the location database, and you've de-anonymized the data. And this is a real, you know, this is a worry that we have as we move to collecting more data about that. But this was a fascinating thing here, and I know a lot of people probably, you know, they looked at the maps. When I saw this, I was like, whoa. You know, I mean, I knew that this information, you know, could be easily found, but this was just a very nice way to put it, you know, to display it.
That's it. Sorry. That's actually really cool, because I've got to do a presentation for Carillion about so how hackers get your information and this kind of thing, for just from a more user standpoint. So that'll be going into my presentation. So thanks for that, Randy.
Oh yeah, I mean, like it says here, there's a company called Cubic, which publishes a list of customers that may have received an ID with precise smartphone locations. And you know, even though it says, well, we prohibit attempts to you know, merge it, well, you know, no, you can put it all together. So anyway, any other questions? I'll stop my share here. That article is, they did one last year tracking cell phone usage, not only in New York City, but in near the White House, surrounding the White House and the Pentagon, you know, just to show how they picked one person who worked in the White House, and you can see where they were and where they went. So anyway.
And for what it's worth, you can do the same thing with your wireless access point associations.
Exactly. And we had a grad student a couple of years who did that. And okay, so you got a MAC address and an IP address and a username, right? But so you tokenize those things so that, you know, Matt's doing research or Rob's doing research. So they get the data, they can still use it, but it doesn't identify anybody. Well, that's nice until all of a sudden, if you guys, the researchers, get access to a class roll, now you know that all of these tokens were in this classroom, and you know all of these names were in that classroom because you looked at the timetable. So out of 36,000 students, now you've narrowed it down to say 30 students, okay? And then if Rob and I have, you know, let's say it's a 6 to 7 o'clock class, but we have a 7 to 8 o'clock class, and now our tokens move over to that classroom. And then we merge the class roll from that classroom With this one, now we know that these two tokens belong to these two people. Now we still don't know which one is which, but again, a little bit more of this sort of binary sorting thing. Eventually you can re-anonymize, de-anonymize the data. So
I know we've gotten completely off topic here, but I just want to mention one thing. We actually had a RISE presentation about this not too long ago. Well, actually, this is probably some time ago.
yeah,
But I don't know if you remember this, Ed, but we had a guy that came in, and I can't remember the name of the company. I'd have to go back and look at the blog, but it
That
was
was my
exactly
first talk.
What's that?
It was my first RISE meeting I joined.
Was that the talk? Was that the one?
Yeah,
Or was that CPI?
They had a product you actually set up, and it scanned the radio frequencies, be it Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, that was emanating from the devices, and triangulated them. But we had an experimental dashboard. There was a student who pulled a fire alarm, and we know where the fire alarm is. We know where the nearest access points are. Just track the roaming data, and you can see people walk all the way across campus. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. Delete this. I need a Faraday bag for my phone now when I'm on campus.
yeah. And a lot of people say, well, we turn off location. I said, yeah, but E911 is still running on your phone. So.
Yeah, there was
Faraday
actually
bag is it.
a
That's it. That's
case
your only option.
there was someone who put a they did like a bomb threat or something for one of the things, and they tracked the person down because he did it anonymously through a Tor browser on campus like network, and he was the only one at this time sending, and he used a Tor browser and he never used it before, and they tracked him all down through all this thing, and it was like, yep. And like if he had used the Tor browser and continued to use it, that'd been one thing, but he didn't, and then so they caught him, and like he used it once and then he stopped using it.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Using a Tor browser is just not a good idea anyway.
No. Well, no. I do know someone mentioned the pie hole. So
Yeah.
I did an internship at Stanton City Schools at one point, and I was there for a few weeks, and I was talking with the guys there, and I got to work with like the high school, the middle schools, the elementary schools, and then they had like this different education center for people who had more, they need like more hands-on whatever with, maybe they were not the anyways, but they actually used Pi-hole on their network for the DNS. Like their entire thing went through a Pi-hole. So like if they went home, like students went home and took a laptop home, they went through their network to get anywhere, and then they like locked down the DNS so you couldn't change that. So you had to go through their network to get onto it, so they could limit what they're reviewing, which I don't know why like K-Spring wouldn't do that, because you could go home and go to play your game at home, go to the school, and it'd still load up because you're already on the page.
Yeah.
Pi-hole's incredibly lightweight. A 4 gigabyte Raspberry Pi can do 1 million queries a day.
Yeah.
More than enough for a home network.
Yeah,
and probably most small businesses.
Put one in for my home network. Put a Pi in.
Yeah.
I just use OpenDNS.
And the crazy thing that, with working from home, like I said, the inventory problem just goes, well, okay, it's an external address as far as my stuff is concerned,
So back to my point, I don't care what you access my network with, you just have to get to my data that I host in a particular way, right?
And you know about the web bug stuff, right? So you can tag your data. You've heard about the web bug stuff?
No.
So let's say that I put my presentation in a PDF file or even in PowerPoint, but I can embed a 1x1 pixel, a white pixel somewhere in my document, and that image does not have to be in the file itself. It can live on a server somewhere else. So when you open up the document, Adobe or Office, whatever, it goes, oh, I need to go here and get this image, and pull it back into the document. Well, now my web server over here goes, oh, this IP address just got this image from me. And
It's canary
then,
tokens.
yeah, and then, you know, and then you go that way. So it's, if you Google web bug, and then there's ways to put them in documents in Word, in Office and PDF. You can, you know, there's ways to do it. It's a trick that web pages used to use. If you looked at the source of a web page and you search for an image tag, an HTML tag that had height of 0 or width of 0 or height of 1 or width of 1, and that would mark, oh, this person hit this page. And they would use that to figure out, you know, where people go. It was like a cookieless way of you know, tracking somebody. So in the cloud example, you know, Rob, you could tag those documents, you know, and track if you have that have a web server that's inside your network. You know, you could track and see. Oh, law firms use this a lot. You know, I'll send Ed a document. I said, Ed, this is for your eyes only. And he reads it. And he goes, holy shit, I got to tell Rob and Matt about this. And he gives it to them and they open it up. And right away, I get those IP addresses, which aren't the ones in his home network, you know, so.
And this is why you should run Little Snitch and Glasswire to filter all of your outbound connections on your work machine.
Right.
Or every machine, really.
Well, and that's where it goes back to looking at outbound traffic. I mean, let's face it. If I've, you know, I know people always freak out. We don't have a border firewall at Virginia Tech. We have 100 and some thousand host-based firewalls, you know, but we don't have a border firewall. But my point here is that, okay, you come in, you're the hacker, you pop a Virginia Tech machine, scores you 1, Randy 0, okay? But if I can interrupt the command and control outbound, because when you come in, unless you're going to destroy my data, right? One of the 3 goals, unless you're going to destroy my data right then and there, you're going to phone home. And if again, using threat intel and other stuff, if I can block that phone home or interrupt that outbound, then it's, you know, you won, you get 1 point, I get 1 point, but tie goes to the defender. Okay. And then, but more importantly, I have an IP address inside my network that I can go and yank that machine off the network. And this is where we run into the inventory problems, right?
It reminds me of a story. I knew a friend of mine, he had 2 Rottweilers, and they were just the gentlest dogs. And I said, you know, I don't understand that, you know, they don't seem aggressive. He says, oh, they'll let you in. It's when you try to leave that they have a problem.
Yep, exactly right. So, but it is funny that, you know, just the outbound traffic thing is, and again, if you look at what the 3 goals of attackers are, and this is stuff that, you know, I get a lot of this, I know it's kind of scary when I say it, you know, I've been looking at this for 30 years and with the various SANS projects and CIS projects and stuff like that, trying to figure out what's the goal. And you look at all of the different types of attacks, the root causes, the actual root causes, it came down to those 3. And so, you know, I said, well, okay, because people would ask me, said, well, what do you defend against? Well, I only have, you know, they're looking at MITRE ATT&CK modules, right, which are the models there, and you got a billion ways to break into a system. But the end result is they're doing that to either use your machine to attack someone else or get to your data. Well, all right, where should I start my defense? The data. So, well, my stomach started growling, so I guess it's time for me to go and grab something to eat.
Real quick, what was
We
the
don't
one
leave
site
until
that you
you
said to download the spreadsheets from?
Auditscripts.com. I'll put it in here in the chat window.
Yeah, we'll post a link to it on the blog after the meeting as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
Auditscripts.com, and then under there, click on the tab. It's free resources, and
Well,
then from there you'll see critical controls.
And with Randy's permission, we did record the session tonight, so we'll be posting that as well. So
Yep.
we'll,
And I'll send you the PowerPoint presentation.
okay, perfect. We'll PDF that up and we'll make sure that it gets posted along with the presentation. So,
Yeah.
but with that being said, thank you very much, Randy. Really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time.
Thank you.
So it's always a pleasure to have you join us when you have the opportunity. So thank you very much. And hopefully we'll be able to see you again soon. Hopefully
Yep.
in October, if not before.